Today we're having real fun doing a comparison between this. This is a longer sketch. What's the benefits of doing something over a longer period of time? This took me about an hour to complete, but it's not the only way to sketch a scene. Often I love sketching really quick. So we're also going to do the same scene in 7 or 8 minutes on the left here, or on the right we can see a lovely example done in about 15 to 20 minutes. So what are the pros, the cons, the advantages and the disadvantages? Today the supplies I'm using, I've got a watercolour pencil, which is a burnt umber. I've got a fountain pen. This is my Platinum 3776 with an ultra extra fine nib. Inside that I have waterproof ink, absolutely vital for all of the sketches we're doing today. And this is Carbon ink by Platinum. A really great black fast drying ink. Underneath I've got my Handmüller Anniversary Edition paper and my normal set of watercolours. Everything here is linked down below in my supplies link in the description. Couple of brushes. We'll be using a big flat brush by Panart, about a 1/2 inch flat brush, and one smaller brush, useful for those smaller sketches. And with that we're going to look and compare 3 different sketches, all of the same scene. This is our reference, it's Medellin in Colombia, and it is linked down below, as well as the individual tutorials of these different sketches I'm doing today. And we're going to start with a really quick sketch. This was supposed to be a 5-minute sketch, but ended up being about a 7 or 8 minute sketch. What this really short time gives us is the opportunity to really simplify. So when I approach a really quick sketch, I might find what I think is the most important part first. So you might have noticed, for me, the most important part was that silhouette going across the top. And then just getting that busyness in. So these vertical lines all suggesting buildings. There's some grass, some greenery, some bushes and things. Get some swirls in to suggest those. What we don't have is loads of time to get stuck into all the detail. We can find a few windows. And this can be liberating. So one of the key advantages of sketching really quickly is to liberate yourself, remove yourself from it being your fault. If you've left things out, your fault if you've made mistakes. Similarly, another really key advantage is it's pretty hard to overwork a very quick sketch. Even the colours will naturally flow because as we apply them on quickly, we're not going to leave gaps between them. They're going to smudge and blend. They're going to float up into the sky like that lovely little orange bloom that's happening on the left of the picture. And with that, we'll end up with something interesting. It may not be exactly what we imagined, but the next key advantage I'm going to talk about is the fact that because it's not what you imagined, you might just learn something. To cheat, to make it easy to sketch quickly, often we have to use a hairdryer. This is a bit of a disadvantage. Notice how flat those colours become because that hairdryer, the hot air, really pushes the colours around and flattens them. Nonetheless, by doing that, it enables us to still quickly apply a bit of contrast. You might notice that because the colours become flat, they become a single value. And so actually being able to come back in really quickly, bosh on some shadows, again, very quick technique, lets this image just become that much more interesting. We're actually going to come back to this in a couple of minutes when it's dried to show you the last little touch I do. But next, let's see what happens if we approach this same scene, but over 15 or 20 minutes. Now for me, I'm still sketching about the same size. So this is a little larger than a postcard sketch. That's because this is a very complicated scene. But I can approach it with a more detail-oriented manner. So instead of having to capture first that silhouette of the scene, now I can come across the scene and I can sort of measure out different shapes. I can find different details and I can try and get the scene more accurate. So the longer we sketch for, basically, it's fair to say the more accurate we can make our scene. There's disadvantages to this. Again, now, because I'm trying a bit more for accuracy, I'm going to be a little bit more prone to self-criticism, to going, oh no, I made a mistake and that's the end of the world because I wish I was a bit better as an artist. But also, you know, I can actually be a bit better of an artist by sketching a bit slower. So swings and roundabouts, as they say. The other thing is it can be a bit tempting. The longer you sketch, the more easy it is to overwork. Here, I'm trying to avoid that by dotting around, by keeping my pen strokes light, and when I find a mistake, trying my best to accept it. Instead of spending a long time just correcting things, actually I'm going, you know what, I've made that mistake, great. This is still a quite quick sketch, I'm going to learn from it, that's fine. The other thing though, is you do have that time, as long as you're careful not to overwork, to add more detail, to add more structure, to add more variation. In our first sketch, you might have noticed many of the lines were of the same quality, like all one depth, all one kind of feel. Here we have bold lines, light lines, hatched lines, thick lines. We've got some little areas that I've blacked in, and we're able to create textures with our pen. Something which you don't have time to do if you're just doing a really quick thumbnail style sketch. Similarly, although I'm painting very loose, I have a lot more time to work those colours. Instead of just having a randomly created sky, I can create my sky with a little bit more intention behind it. Same with the colours, I can dot around. Before I was just jumping in and letting the colours blend and hoping something great happened. Now I'm hoping something great's happening, but I'm also controlling a little bit more where those colours are going. I'm still getting the blooms. I like those blooms, so I want them to happen. But they're not as wild and uncontrolled. And we'll see a comparison between the two sketches very soon, and you'll see what I mean. Similarly, we're able to work those shadows. This is still the first layer, but because I'm taking longer, able to build up a little bit more tone, a little bit more value. We can have these yellows and greens become richer. We can apply richer oranges. We can apply some shadows in the first layer of our colours. And because we're sketching a bit longer, we can take time to let it dry. This is me coming back to the first sketch where I thought I'd show you those last little bits you can do. This only took me around 20 or 30, well, it's probably more like a minute actually, about a minute of extra drawing at the end of my 7-8 minute sketch. And look how much that just adds structure and makes it pop. We can compare that process to what I'm going to do on the right. This is our 15 to 20 minute sketch, remember, this one on the right. And now I'm being more purposeful about the lines. I'm not just running around the page. I'm going to be able to get a lot more textures. I'm going to be able to sort of block in more areas, find more immediate sort of contrast with my pen, find more details, and just spend a lot longer considering what I want out of the scene. This is basically building up on that variation we had before. And now what we're doing is building up on that tone and contrast we had before, increasing the value in our sketch, the value being the shadows. With shadows, with contrast, things become more shapely, they become more 3D. And hopefully you can see that this scene on the right has more shape. It might not be better or more interesting, but it has more shape. Now, the last one, of course, is our big sketch. Now this one, I'm actually not sure how long it took me, but certainly longer than 45 minutes. And you can see, well, number one, I feel confident to sketch bigger. Number two, I feel confident to put some planning in. If I put planning into a small sketch, I feel like I will overwork it. If I have all these pencil marks on my page followed by ink, that's a lot going on. But on a big sketch, it's not going to be too much. I can leave these pencil marks. I'm actually using watercolour pencils, so they'll soften with our watercolours anyway. But I can leave them there and they'll look great. So bigger sketch, longer time, more planning. Hopefully what that leads to is more accuracy. Again, there's those risks of therefore self-criticism, but with the planning and things, I think I'm able to hopefully be resilient enough to just appreciate whatever happens with this sketch in the end. What you can see me doing now is being much more considered about the shapes. My lines are a little bit more confident. They're a little bit more specific. And just as before, in the second sketch, I'm aiming to work my way around getting specific shapes, specific details, rather than just jumping in and trying to immediately get the essence of the scene. Now, I don't know if you could hear that little barking in the background. Believe it or not, that is Betty dreaming. She's a very vivid dreamer, so apologies for those noises. Anyway, let's get back to talking about what's going on in this sketch. So what I'm doing now, what I'm able to do, is really locate specific shapes. So instead of rushing, finding the details which come in front of me, which jump into my mind, I'm able to actually work gradually around the page. Notice I'm not just sticking in one place. I'm sort of going from one place, then to a different place, then to a different place. Now the reason for this is we talked about overworking as a risk in these longer sketches. And it is a real risk because we could just keep going. You know, how long is a long sketch? For me, it's an hour, hour and a half at most. And I do some lives which are that long, particularly with Colin when we're talking at the same time. For some people, it might be 4, 5, 6 hours. And you can imagine the amount of ink you could put down just could become way too much. It could really overfill the page. But if we jump around, if we find a detail here, if we find a detail there, a little bit there, we'll be able to create more balanced image, and we'll be able to look at it more objectively, not get too stuck into one area, and we'll be able to notice when things are getting too busy. Similarly, I can apply these lovely textures, but I can be more specific. Notice how much neater and finer my hatching is here. It's really suggesting far more of a gentle shadow than the sort of harsh, brutal shadows that I was suggesting before. And now we can jump in with the colours. Again, being able to be more specific. So this will actually show you something I don't often do on this channel, which is where I'm trying to find semi-realistic colours. Often I find a couple of colours I like, then I just go for it. But here I'm actually mixing my colours between each other a little bit, adding bits of orange to red to yellow to green to vary those washes to get them feeling like they really feel for me in the reference. Obviously not perfect. I want to exaggerate the colours. I want to make this an interesting image. You'll also notice I'm painting well within the shapes. So I'm getting minimal spread, except in a couple of places where I think it benefits. So the spreading, the leaking, the blooms, which are a brilliant part of watercolours, are again even more controlled. And as we do this, we can slowly build up our scene. Again, just look at the amount of extra contrast we can add. Already these shadows are coming into play really nicely. And the scene actually just has a more, again, realistic feel. The difference here is it feels less abstract, perhaps more illustrative. Illustrative being that kind of bold, poster-like feel. But that's not necessarily just because I'm painting slower. That's because of the style I'm using here. But nonetheless, as you do paint slower, it does give you the opportunity to explore different things, different styles. You can see there a little bloom which did emerge, and because I'm painting slower again, and another one, I can remove it if it's too much. I can just pick it up, drag it away. And we're almost done. The next thing to do is just another layer of watercolours. Again, taking our time, moving around, jumping around the image. We can apply a shadow here, a shadow there. And these shadows really are the hallmark of watercolours. The ability to layer up, gradually increase intensity, is really the hallmark of painting slower. And as we do that, as we move around and build up the layers and build up the contrast, we build up the shape and the interest. And hopefully you'll agree, by the end of this, we end up with quite a fun, interesting and shape-filled scene. Don't forget to check out the tutorial for this sketch down below, and I'll see you in the next video.